Congressman Ritchie Torres, thank you so much for joining me here on Political Personalities with Sky. You're from the Bronx. You're a former New York City council member. It's great to see you here. And today we're going to talk about your new bill, the SANTOS Act, which stands for Stop Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker. And before we dive into some of the questions surrounding that, it sounds like a great idea, right? It's what we do in corporate America. It's what we have to do when you apply for any government job. You do a background check, they check your references. There are some questions on Twitter, at least, about the constitutionality and legality of it, which I want to get into with you. But before that, I need to hear the story of how you came up with the title of a bill, which the acronym spells out SANTOS.
It's a simple story, based on the George Santos scandal. I developed the concept of the legislation. I have to credit my staffer with coining the acronym. Stop Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker. So credit goes to my staffer, Zach Grossman, who's my legislative director. He was clever enough to coin the acronym.
Yeah, because I could imagine, being in a brainstorm like that and thinking, how are we going to come up with something creative that's punchy, that'll get some news hits, because it was in headline news this morning. So I just figured you guys would be there high-fiving each other, that you came up with something cool to bring attention to an important issue.
Although, even though the title's provocative, the substance of the legislation is a matter of common sense.
Yeah. There are probably a lot of people that didn't realize that we didn't have something like this in place to begin with.
Look, I find it outrageous that a fraudulent candidate like George Santos can lie to voters about his qualifications without repercussions, without legal consequences. And so that inspired me to introduce the SANTOS Act, which requires federal candidates to disclose in writing, under oath, under the penalty of perjury, their employment, educational, and military history, so that candidates who do lie to voters can be punished, can be held accountable. Voters should have the ability to compare what a candidate like George Santos has said under oath versus what he says on the campaign trail. That will enable the detection of lies, that will enable the exposing and punishing of candidates who tell those lies.
Right. So now what about the questions of the legality and constitutionality? I saw some of that chat on Twitter about how this could be implemented. Is it feasible?
I see no constitutional issues because individuals and institutions have to make disclosures all the time to the government, right? When you're running for public office, you have to disclose your name, your address, you have to disclose your donors. So if disclosure were unconstitutional, that would invalidate all of election law. It would invalidate all of securities law, practically almost every area of law. So much of the laws that we pass are dependent on transparency and disclosure. So I see no constitutional right. I'm not aware of a First Amendment right to perjure yourself.
Okay, so there you go for anyone that had that question. Now, George Santos, Congressman-elect, is under investigation. And as we know, like with the county, with the state, with the feds, that investigation could take a long time. It could potentially take the full 2 years of his term. So my next question is, if he is your colleague, he plans to be sworn in on Tuesday, will you be willing to work with him?
I feel strongly that George Santos has no business being in Congress. He fundamentally defrauded the voters of New York State. He has lied about every aspect of his life. And it horrifies me that he will not only become a member of Congress, but that he might have access to information and briefings affecting matters of national security. I feel strongly that he has no business being in Congress. I will not shake his hand. I have no interest in any working relationship with him whatsoever.
And I know some of the things you tweeted, Congressman Torres, about that you're not Jewish, but you're a big advocate and strong supporter of Israel, and that you grew up in public housing and you didn't go to college, but yet you made it here and the voters chose you. And that's a stance that you're proud of. And I'm wondering the difference between making these points politically and how it touches you personally.
The tragic irony of George Santos is that his actual story of coming from humble origins, of being a wage earner, of being the son of a domestic worker, is actually pretty compelling. It's more compelling than the lie that he told to voters. So the lies that he's told are not only bad morals, it was actually bad politics.
So your bill will prevent this from happening in the future. Do you see any bumps along the way in getting this passed?
Look, passing legislation in a Republican House is going to be complicated no matter what, but what possible argument could one make against a bill that requires candidates to tell the truth to voters?
Right.
Look, he's innocent until proven guilty, but if he did in fact commit a crime, he could conceivably resign as part of a plea bargain with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So that would be the quickest circumstance in which he's removed from public office.
Mhm.
There's never a dull moment in Washington, D.C., but the story is just shocking to me. I mean, George Santos pretended to be an Afro-Latino, Ukrainian, Belgian, Brazilian, Catholic, Jew, whose ancestors survived the Holocaust, whose mother died twice, including a 9/11, whose employees died in the Pulse mass shooting, and who magically became a millionaire overnight. It is the greatest fiction ever told in the history of congressional politics.
Well, thank you, really, Congressman Ritchie Torres, for your thoughts and for proposing this Santos bill. And we'll be following the story. And thanks for all the good work that you do for the Bronx, for New York, and for the country.
And I'll let my team know that you're a big fan of the title.
Yes. Oh, they know on Twitter. Thank you.